Hello, Svitlana.
Hello, Arne.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing very good. How are you?
Excellent. I'm doing okay. It's, as you can see, I'm home. It's a stormy day out, so it's the best weather to stay inside, either work or learn some chess. Perfect segue.
Mhm.
What did you prepare for me and us today, according to chess exercises?
Well, I thought today's lessons was going to be the exact opposite of last week's, and I'll have you take a guess. What is the first thing that you think of when I tell you the name Tigran Petrosian?
Tigran Petrosian. That should be defending and positional.
Yes, it's defense, right?
Defense. Okay.
Yeah,
Defense monster.
yes, he was very good at defense. He was the ninth world chess champion. And yeah, he was mainly known for his defensive techniques. It's just like Mikhail Tal was known for his combinations, Gary Kasparov was known for his attacks. When we talk about Tigran Petrosian, his kind of trademark was his defensive techniques. And he's known as a defensive player, and many people automatically think that his games were um, full of boring and passive defense. But that's actually very far from the truth because his defense was always full of counterattacking chances and even sometimes bluffing and posing the most difficult tasks to the opponent. So
Okay.
I wanted to take a look at one of his games because I think in the past few weeks you've also asked how to improve my positional play or how to stop sacrificing as much. So I thought it would be fitting to do something on defense this time.
Wonderful. Okay, it's time to open the horizon, especially for myself now. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this. Okay.
So this is a game between Mikhail Tal and Tigran Petrosian, and
Oh,
that was kind of the clash of two completely contrasting styles,
indeed.
right? Because Mikhail Tal was known for his combinations, so his defensive techniques were really shown in full glory here.
Okay.
And let's start. I'll just show it to you from the opening. The defense doesn't start right away, but hold on, I can't use my arrows.
Ah, okay. That's of course. If you cannot use the arrows, it's going to get problematic.
Okay,
Now it works. Okay.
now it's working. So I'll just show you a few beginning moves. You can probably tell the opening was the Rue Lopez, and both sides are developing as per normal. And well, let's maybe stop at around this move where we're coming out of the opening and transitioning into the middle game. So just to get used to the position, we're not at the defensive part of the lesson yet.
Okay.
But what do you think? I don't know if you play this for white or for black. Do
It
you?
it sometimes happens. Yeah, Rui Lopez is a thing I prefer to be. Yeah, often as black player. I played it as a white player in the very beginning of learning to play chess.
So try to guess which plans white and black are both trying to accomplish here.
Okay, and for you at home, try to look at the board down here. Try to replay the position as far as possible. I'll maybe put on two or three different positions so you can follow at the certain parts of the video. And yeah, this is the position of which we are starting. So let's think of the plans for white. Now, white is already pushing into the center and now has developed the knight to d2, which will very likely jump to b3 at one point. That's my keen guess, and maybe give a bit more power, yeah, to either d4 or yeah, just also open up the row, the diagonal for the bishop on the black squares. But the plan for white is, yeah, I think at the moment it looks like there's no shenanigans with the f pawn yet, but it's going to try to, yeah, just push a bit forward into the center. It looks like, oh well, both of the bishops are pointing to the black king already, but yeah, a bit of a center. And black, um, black is black can actually, it's pretty similar on both sides. I mean, there are a lot of pawns in the center, and all the pieces are still available on both sides. So probably black might get the bishop to either b7. Yeah, b7 is a good idea to just connect the rooks together and get his last piece into the game. And maybe at one point the knight on a5 should also go on c6, or probably even c4, but no, it doesn't look so good. He might move back. Yeah, that's my very amateurish take on both parts. Now,
No, I think you're right for the most part, as in both sides are trying to develop some play in the center. So it's both white and black who's going to be trying to take control. But white's plan with this knight is actually not to go to b3, but it is to go to f1 and then either e3 or g3. Usually those are the plans, and then from here to f5.
yes,
Those are the usual plans here, and then this knight can also help it maybe from f4 or from h4. It really depends, but usually in the Rue Lopez and in the Italian slow, that's the typical knight maneuver, is that it's going to f5, and white's main idea is basically to develop an attack. That's usually what white wants, and black tries to find counter chances, for example, in the center. So yeah, those are usually the plans, but that was just to get used to the position.
okay.
It was a bit, it's going a bit differently after. So the knight actually ended up coming to c4, and in case white just pushes it away, then the knight doesn't mind coming back, and that just creates a few weaknesses for white. So that's why the knight is led to stay there, and it actually gets traded. Yeah, so we just continue watching the game for now. We're not at the attacking part just yet, but
just quickly,
yeah.
who is actually Tal and who is Petrosian here? Petrosian is probably black.
Yes, Petrosian is black. Yes. And now f4 is coming up. So the idea of this knight d2 move was to open up f4. And yeah, those are going to be white's plans. Usually, whoever plays the Rue Lopez, or let's say the Italian for that matter, is probably looking to develop some sort of attack. So it's not surprising that as white, especially it's Tal, that he tried to develop an attack here. In case black does something in the center right now, this would be a completely possible plan for black to go for. This was just another possibility of how play can develop.
Okay.
Again, it's the usual piece placements here. It's just that the center was traded off. So that's not what happened in the game, and they played Petrosian played rook to e8. So he tries to attack, and now rook a to d8 is a slight inaccuracy. Could even say that it's a mistake, because after this move, the position really becomes a lot easier for white to play. So let's say at this point, as you can tell, white has a really strong pawn structure in the center, and there is honestly not much that black's pieces are doing, and there's not much that they're attacking. So from here on, from here on, the position is pretty difficult for black, just because black doesn't have much improvement
Mm-hmm.
plans. But whereas for white, it's pretty clear that he can double on the f file, bring his pieces to the king side, etc. But we are going to see how um, Petrosian did not mind this position and actually ended up defending it pretty well.
Okay.
So the game continues. They're going for some positional plans. The point of the a4 and a5 pawn push was to free up this a4 square
Oh,
for the
funny
bishop
that
for the
the
trade.
that the rook goes back from e8 again to f8 where he was earlier.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
but it
Actually,
makes
maybe.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Maybe I should explain. So, rook f8, this move looks rather passive, but it's important in preparation to respond to white's attack. So, it protects the f7 square, right?
Mm-hmm.
In case there's ever some doubling that white is going to do on the f file. Plus, the rook doesn't have much to do on e8 anyway, so it decided to open up that square for the knight instead. So maybe the knight could remaneuver itself from
Exactly.
e8 to later d6.
Exactly. And then give space for the f file. Yeah, it's a pretty cool move. I like that. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not the most impressive one in his defensive moves yet, but yes, this is a good one too. So there was a trade of bishops. It's unclear to say who it actually favored, but anyways, we are getting to the good part. So now
Okay.
white's pieces are already close to all coming onto the king side, and yeah. So here, try to find essentially a plan for black of how you would defend here.
Okay. So black defending. Wait a second. What is white attacking? Let's take a look at that first. So um well, okay, so the bishop is pointing to c5, but that is pretty good, pretty well defended. But then the queen can go to f2. Maybe this is why the queen went to f3. And the knight can go to b3. But then black can go with the rook to c8. Am I overthinking this or am I on the right track?
Um, the c5 pawn is a weakness, but I actually think black's bigger problem is the one that is going to happen on the king side if he doesn't do anything. So
Okay.
there's going to be, he can white can go rook f1, bring the second rook, bishop g5 at some point. But yeah, I think the bigger problem
Okay.
is bringing the knight. The knight still has the square f3, h4, f5, and so that's kind of the more problematic part, is that black doesn't well if you don't do anything as black, then white just has an easy improvement plan. And yeah, basically, how do you ever find something to do here as black other than just defending?
Okay, I get it. So then I will go to this little initial plan or this idea to uncrowd the king a little by placing the knight to e8 with the chance to go to d6.
Okay, so if you go with your knight to d6, it would normally be it actually, I think, almost happens sometime later in the game, but
Okay.
it's a good place for the knight. But then the problem is your c5 pawn, right? From d6, it's going to block the bishop, and you might have problems with your c5 pawn now.
Okay, I see. Okay. So what does it take too long if I'm trying to fianchetto with black? So that
I
would be knight e8, g6, bishop f6, and then g7? Or
I
is this
think
too
it's
crazy?
I think it does take a while. And is your bishop much better on G7 than it was on E7?
Yeah, you might be right. As you can already spot, I'm terrible with defending.
No,
I
no, it's not easy. It's not easy. If that makes you
Okay.
feel better, Tal missed this maneuver too.
Okay. Well, what could this be? So there's always, this is my last take, and then I will let you talk, of course. But my last idea is that I could get the queen to d7 cleverly to attack the rook on a4 at one point, and maybe combine this with another sweet move. But I wouldn't know which one yet.
So, well, it's not queen d7 just yet, but I don't want you to give up. If I give you a hint, I think you can get it.
Oh, okay.
So, um, the amount of pieces that black has on the king side right now is the knight, the bishop, and the rook on f8 are both are all there and are all defending. If you could place, let's say, a rook anywhere on the board, where would you place it?
I see. Okay, this was before you said it. I had the last idea, which would have been, but yeah, it would. It is rook to d6,
Yeah.
because like this, it can go over to the king side beautifully, and yeah, it's a nice. And also, if c5 is attacked, then the knight easily can go to d7 and defend from there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So if
cute.
we go to knight d7 right away, I think it's probably not a bad idea, but then it's the same setup except your rook on d8 is never doing anything. There are no open files, so the rook really has nothing to do on the queen side, and it beautifully moves to d6, and from there, knight to d7 comes, and and the rook now has a free way to go to g6. I think
Beautiful.
it's a really nice rook maneuver, and yeah, so it's not only a defensive maneuver because the rook from the king side obviously defends the king rather well, but it's kind of an attacking piece at the same time. So that's kind of the highlight of Petrosian's defensive play, is that it's not always fully defensive, is that he keeps in mind his own counterattacking ideas as well. And
Gotcha.
getting rid of this rook is really, really difficult. So as a few moves went by, he repositioned his pieces, so now they're much better placed than they were even 3 moves ago. And let's say after h4, so Tal obviously doesn't give up on pursuing his attack, and but this move, it's hard to say whether it's actually a good attacking move or a long-term weakness. How would you defend against white's threats as black? So try to find what white is threatening, and yeah, which maybe I'll even say which piece is not really participating in the defense right now.
That is the queen. So to get the queen, but before that, let me quickly say, so white, of course, threatens h5 to get the rook out of the way, or at least on one of the black squares, which is much more vulnerable. And how to counter this? Yeah, so the queen is not really participating that well at the moment, and it can move because there's enough defenders on c5. So if I play, but I'm not sure if I can see how much queen d8 improves. Yeah. For you at home, have you seen the idea of Petrosian here? Because I haven't.
You totally have. I don't know why you're
Yeah.
doubting your queen d8 move. It's the right one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what
So the
happens
queen.
after h5 then?
Yeah. So he did play h5, and well, your rook now has to move. And yes, you were right that white's idea was obviously to move the rook and play h4 and h6 eventually. I think that was the main thing that he was going for. Um, and yeah, so rook went to f6, attacked the queen, queen to g4. So this was probably the position where you questioned
Yeah.
what black was going to do.
I was questioning this this was one of the moves, and the other one was the bishop to g5. But I think black will turn out as a winner and just win a piece like that.
Right. So
Yeah.
bishop g5, rook f3, bishop takes d8, takes
Yes,
the
and
rook
then
and the bishop.
yeah. So this wouldn't have taken. Yeah, but this is like then again, this is my interesting thought that I like the position of white at the moment.
Yeah, and you're not the only one. Even Tal admitted that he thought that this position was winning
Huh.
until, well, we're gonna see what
Oh,
how Petrosian actually defended it, and this is probably the most interesting moment in the game. I want you to try to find Black's move, and once you see it, it's not gonna seem as difficult, but I think in a game it would be much harder to decide on something like that. But try to find the move for Black.
so I immediately have in mind bishop to e7, because there is this threat of bishop to g5, and that counters it immediately. And at the moment, if white pushes h6, this is no threat at all, because the rook can just jump back to g6. Yeah.
That's a little more passive than I think Petrosian would like. So it's not bishop to e7. The bishop on d6 is doing pretty well.
Okay.
It's basically once you see it, you're gonna think it's really simple. But
So how about I'll just take the rook on f1 and then place the knight to f6?
I think that is actually what white wants. He actually wants the trade of those rooks, because that rook is one of the main defenders. So if you take and play knight f6, I'm assuming that either the queen will move, and then bishop g5 is coming up.
So for you at home, have you spotted the perfect defense move, if it is even a defense move, or like the best move for black now? Because is it h6? Is this that
No,
simple? No.
It's not h6, but
God,
I think h6 is one of the like lines that would be considered that I think you could consider as black, but it's more of a passive defense, which Petrosian was not known for.
Okay, then my very last idea is king to h8.
Again, why such passive defense? I was just telling you that Petrosian was all about counterattack, and this is one of his trademarks. Do you know what one of his trademarks is? Like the one thing that really I don't know how to call it. It's really his thing that he's known for.
No, tell me, please.
It's a exchange sacrifice, positional exchange sacrifice.
Oh.
He would do it on c3. You know, in the Sicilian, he would sacrifice rook c3 a lot.
That's cool.
Even he did rook e6 sometimes for white's light squared bishop. So this is one of those moments. Does that give it away?
Yeah, I guess. Because I can only see that it would be the rook to f4.
Yeah, rook to f4. This is his trademark. Your h6 move is more of a passive defense. I don't think it loses immediately, but it's one of those things where you just let white do whatever he wants, and he slowly improves his pieces, and you're not posing any problems, and eventually something like this is going to happen, and it's just your position just gets worse and worse every move.
True. Oh, wow. Okay, this is tough. Look, oh gosh, I just gave 5 decisions and all of them were wrong. And rook to f4, the signature move of Petrosian. Yeah, so let's think of this. Let me try before you say anything and give it away. Why is this a good idea? Let me think for a second, please. So now, what happens if the bishop takes on f4? I will take back with the pawn, and
Mhm.
then my knight can have two beautiful spots with e5 and f6, I assume. But that is enough? Okay, so let's. I wouldn't have seen this. Never. It's crazy. It's a nice move, I guess.
Yes,
Let's
but
see.
it's one of those things that you I think once you know these ideas, you're gonna find it a lot simpler to see during your games, because if you just don't even have that at the back of your mind that this positional exchange sacrifice idea could exist, you're not even gonna take a look at it.
Okay.
But yeah, it's I think it's mostly when players come up with this, it's mostly because they had nothing better. Like everything else just looked so bad that it was just method of elimination, where
Uh-huh.
everything else they saw was losing. But this made it complicated, so that's why they played it. But I'm sure the Trojan had a very deep reasoning for it. Yeah, but that's
Certainly.
how I see it. If you want to try to find those moves during your games, I think they will come, as long as you just keep in mind that you want to complicate the position. And
Hmm.
the reasoning behind it is, like you said, it's actually not as tactical. That's why I said it's a he was known for his positional exchange sacrifices. So you don't always need to find like a long 10 move variation after it. It's
Yeah.
looking at positional factors. So it was actually better for white
To take with the rook, right?
to
That's
take with the
also an
rook.
option. Yeah.
Yes. And actually, I think computer doesn't exactly like the rook f4 move, but it's like it's doubting it. It doesn't say that black is lost, but I think it's definitely the best practical decision, because you're not letting white carry on with the attack and you make things more complicated. And it actually was the move that completely turned the game around. So it was better to take with the rook and play something like this, but this doesn't look as bad anymore, right? Um,
Uh-huh. But
at least the yeah.
is black a pawn down or not?
Yeah,
Yes.
black is a pawn down,
Ah, but
but
okay, I just see also c4 is an option too at one point.
yeah,
Taking
c4
on
is for
c4.
later. But the main thing was just neutralizing white's attack.
Sure.
And yeah, something like this doesn't look amazing, I know, but it's at least the attack is neutralized for now, and this is better than the position was before.
Yeah, this is such a good point. This is a really good point. It is better than the position before, yes, because there was a strong attack from white, and as you mentioned already, Mikhail Tal said he was preferring his game, but that is actually a killer in the best sense, because it just takes away all the yeah, it takes away pieces. The attacking pieces are gone for white, and white has to do loads of maneuvers to get the knight in, the other rook in, and meanwhile, black has still yeah, his piece is pretty active, his minor pieces, and can do some damage, it seems.
Right. So the positional ideas here are that so you closed with this exchange sacrifice, so you closed the F file, right? Which was one of White's main attacking
Sure, yeah.
files. Then you also opened up the E5 square for your knight. You opened up more space for your dark squared bishop. So it has quite a few positional benefits if you look at it from that sense. And that's why it's more of a positional sacrifice than it is tactical. So yeah, I'm sure he relied more on positional factors. And the best thing
Yeah.
for white to do is actually to give back the exchange and just play a position with, I believe, being a pawn up here, but black probably doesn't even want to take it. And yeah, so this was possible. He didn't play this because I
Oh.
think um, once you have an extra exchange, you kind of want to prove it that
Yeah, that you can
that you're up
maneuver.
material
Yeah.
and you don't want to give it back. But rook f4 was better, but it gets quite complicated. He played knight to d2, so white starts from this point starts kind of panicking and losing the thread of the game a little. And it's I think that happens a lot because when you felt like you had a risk-free attack going on for so long, and now suddenly your opponent starts posing you some sort of counter chances, it becomes kind of unsettling, and that comes back to the idea of why it's hard to play the positions where you're better, because once you feel like that advantage is slipping away, I think it's a hard psychological thing to process. So yeah, but now we're looking at it from a defense point of view, so that you should try to make positions more complicated whenever you're worse. And once the position either balances out or becomes more complicated, that's definitely to your advantage, because it's harder for the opponent to switch gears and realize that he's not better anymore.
Interesting. Okay. Makes
Yeah.
sense.
So
Yeah, there's the discovered move, so queen shouldn't probably take on f4.
that's what Tal did. It was better not to.
Oh.
It was better not to and play something like queen h3, but he took.
So then bishop takes knight takes c4, I assume, right?
Exactly. Knight takes c4. Now he played e5.
Knight goes back.
That was his move. He did take back. He could have taken the knight too, but that was worse. But yes, takes back.
Yes.
So he did this to free up the squares for his knight. So now his knight can actually go to e4 and take control of that important square. But if we look at it material-wise, now it's only technically white is technically only one pawn up.
Yeah.
Because it's bishop and pawn for a rook. So it's getting better. Plus, again, it's about improvement. It's about having your position better than it was like 3 moves ago. And if we look at it now, it's a lot more double-edged than before, where it was only white who had a plan and black just had nothing to do, really. So now after rook a to e1, black is still not off the hook. So white keeps the pressure, and it's important to realize kind of all the turning points in the game. So this is probably the second one, where it's time to start not only looking at defensive moves from opponents' threats, but also start developing ideas of your own. So at some point, once you see the chance, you have to start looking at ideas where you can flip it around and start maybe count your counterattacking chances.
I get that, yeah.
Try to once again demonstrate good defensive technique.
So, well, immediately d3 is of course a nice spot for the knight. So the queen would take. No, but that's. Is it helping? No, I don't think it's good. Then there is. If I can get the... Oh, yeah, there is a lot of pieces hanging, actually. I just realized this now. So if black manages to capture the b pawn or the a pawn, then those pawns on the queen side are massive. To accomplish this, it would be good to swap even more pieces, maybe?
Well, white has an immediate threat right now. Knight to d6 is pretty big because he's trying to win your knight on e5.
Yeah.
So we need to take care of that one first, and then we can think about pawns, because the pawn weaknesses aren't going anywhere. They're going to stay there for a long time.
Sure. Well, I would then again... Okay, so I have 2 things in mind. I have a very passive idea. Does it work?
The other one. Whatever the other one is, the other one is better.
Okay, so it's not f6. Fair enough. Well, then it has to be... or does it?
It's not necessarily attacking at first glance, but it's about taking care of what white is threatening you, but at the same time, like, you keep your own interests in mind too. Okay. So the main thing is, first we need to just take care of this bishop being attacked.
Yeah. So let me try to calculate knight to d3. Now, if Okay, doesn't seem to be the right one. But
Knight d3. Well, you can still try to calculate it.
okay, so the knight to d3, the queen would take d6. Yeah, I don't even need to calculate. It's just simply not working. But what would happen if I play the knight to c4?
Knight to
Defending my bishop on d6 and attacking the pawn and the queen at the same. Oh gosh, it's not working. It's a discovered attack.
Yeah, I think white can just either move the queen or, I mean, knight of six is working too, but yeah, I don't think it's knight c4.
No, I doubt it is knight c4.
You don't actually want to swap pieces for now.
Wow, why is this so complicated for me? Are you at home feeling the same, or is it just me?
I think
Okay,
it's because defense is not something we're used to practicing really. You know, it's
might be.
way more common to look at, you know, people's attacking games and solving tactics. So I think that's why defense is usually a hard skill to master because it's not something we usually really practice.
Okay, so it's about this bishop on d6.
Yes.
Well, but if I'm thinking of bishop e7 is not working because the knight is just falling.
Yeah.
And bishop c7 or b8 doesn't look good for me because of d6.
Well, then you have your knight d3 idea.
Oh, but the pawn is so wide forward then. So, okay. So this is actually the right move, bishop c7,
Not c7, but
but
b8.
b8. Oh wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
I would have never guessed this because I'm too scared, or like, let's say, yeah, scared is probably the right word. So what happens after d6, knight d3? Because now I think it's a good time for white to give back this exchange. And
right. Well, knight d3, I think at the very least, has black has that, and the pawn, I don't know, to me doesn't look that threatening. You
no,
can probably take the one on a5. Well, take the rook first, and then take
yeah,
the one on a5, and then if you ever want to, you can even sacrifice your bishop at the end for this pawn on d6, win the pawn on b2. I feel like actually it's black who has the upper hand because you can have your own passed pawn too with c4. Like you said, the queenside pawns can become pretty important here. So I think white would not want to give up the exchange just for nothing.
okay. Oh,
And the idea of bishop
crazy.
to v8 is not that it's only a defensive move. That's what I find amazing about Petrosian's play is that so he looks at the opponent's threat and he finds a response to it, which at the same time he doesn't forget his own ideas.
I see.
So his own idea is to play c4, bishop a7, check, and knight to d3. You know, and suddenly he already has a new plan that he can carry out, and it's a pretty threatening one for white too. So it's not just about defending, and it's at the same time seeing your own resources.
Yeah. So actually, yes. I mean, that distinguishes d6 immediately because black in the worst case doesn't even have to take the rook on e1 because then again, positionally and from the idea, this looks beautiful. I mean, like looking at the bishop on a7, looking at c4, and the knight on d3. This is just the other way around a little bit. Yeah.
Right. And wouldn't you agree
Huh.
that once you see these moves, they make so much sense, and that
Yes.
it's unbelievable how it's hard for us to really, it would be hard for us to find them in the game, but once you see it but once you see Petrosian doing it, it all seems so simple and so clear. But he was really a very logical player. So
Hmm.
all of his, well, at least to me, I think of him as a very logical player, because once you see his plans, they start making sense.
Yeah, yeah, it's very interesting. There it is, d6. Yeah, but
Yeah, there
it's
it is,
not
d6.
that big of a
And
deal anymore. Yeah.
but to be honest, right now, as you can see, already it's Black who's taking over the
Yeah.
initiative. Now he's creating his own threats. And White made a mistake here and played Queen G4. It was better to play Queen E3, but even there, I think White is already not better, at least. But yeah, so the rest I can still show you the rest of the game, but it's already kind of deviates from our topic of defense.
Wow.
But let's just see a few more moves. So now he plays f5. So that's the reason why Queen G4 was a mistake. So now if Rook takes, there's a
It's
tactic,
very nice tactic, yes.
and you win the knight on e4.
Yeah.
So anyways, it's like I said, the rest is kind of complicated. And again, here just to
Whoa.
clarify it, you can't take the knight because of Queen to c4, and you lose the knight on
Okay, didn't
d3.
see that as quick. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Wow.
and yeah, it is getting really complicated there,
Okay.
but from a few more moves, everything gets traded, and
Yes, I just thought d6 is probably the way to go. Haha.
right, and we get somewhere here, and there were some more moves. Technically, Black, I think, missed a win. If you're interested in the specific details of the game, I'm pretty sure it's in Kasparov's. It made it to Kasparov's My Great Predecessors book.
Huh.
So
Okay.
he does deep analysis of that of the rest of the game, but yeah, I just show you the winning line. It was basically Queen A6, Rook F4, and now not taking the pawn on A5 because Queen D6 is coming and you lose the pawn on B4. So the key is really to hold on to that pawn on B4 because that's Black's only winning chance.
So it's,
So you play Rook
yeah,
B8,
rook b8, yes.
and yeah, and that was the winning plan that Black missed. At the end of the day, it was a draw.
Uh-huh.
So eventually, Black lost the pawn on b4, and I mean, a position like this definitely looks drawn, and I really don't think that Black had any chances after. And it's not really that interesting. They still played for probably like 20 more moves, but the main thing that I wanted to show about this game um, was his defensive techniques there, how he just turned around the whole
Mm-hmm.
game with that positional exchange sacrifice, and how his defense was not at all passive, and that he always looked for counter chances.
That was far more exciting than I expected. Yes. Wow, and what a cool game. I'm still a bit stunned about how all of this turned out in the end. It's I'm just at this very moment I'm looking at rook e4 and I'm wondering if that's working, but it's probably not. I mean, it has been analyzed long enough, but yeah, what an exciting game and what an interesting way of defending. Especially so yeah, you can unshare the screen, so thanks for this lesson. Especially I think it is very beautiful because there are moves which well, when we play tactics, when we do the tactics trainer, when we play blitz games, all of that, this is normally not a position where we go like find the best move for Black and it's a very defensive move or one of the positional sacrifices. And this is actually something I which is very new for me. So the rook to
Mhm.
f4, yes, also from the explanation you gave, completely makes sense. It's interesting too. But normally I'm the one who's attacking and then I'm giving a positional attacking sacrifice to get more attacking pieces in, or maybe let the pawns run to the opponent king or something like that. So very
Right.
very cool thing. Now, can you give us or myself maybe like a hint of how to find the idea of making this positional sacrifice? You mentioned earlier, once you run out of ideas probably of finding a good defensive move, it might be a good way to think of something like that. Is this like the main idea, or can you get to this point a bit quicker by
Right.
exercising?
So I think, yeah, I think it really depends, but that's the one thing, important thing you mentioned is that it's defense is really not a skill that we practice really often unless we get ourselves into a bad position during the game and we have no choice. So, yeah, I really think the reason why it's so hard for us to find it is because we're used to looking at, we're used to practicing tactics, looking at amazing attacking games, and we always think of ourselves as the attacker and never as the other side.
Hmm.
Um, so, yeah, I think the important things to remember, well, the way you can find more defensive ideas like this is by, for example, looking at the games of some of the great defenders. For example, Tigran Petrosian was one of them. So now that you like have seen this game, now you'll maybe keep the rook f4 exchange sacrifice idea somewhere at the back of your mind, and you never know when when it might come in handy.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, looking at the games of good defenders, maybe if you really want to improve your skill of defense, you could play training games with a partner. Maybe if you find that in all of your games your defense is really your main weakness, you can play some positions where you can like think of some positions with your partner, where you'll be worse and you'll be under attack, and you'll play a training game with them, like a rapid game or maybe even a blitz game where you can just practice defending
Mm-hmm.
from that point of view, and maybe you can switch and then be the attacking side. So it would be good practice for both of those things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think the main kind of takeaway is to remember that defense is not really synonymous with passivity, right? It's usually as we see, the greatest defenders were the ones that always kept an eye out for counterattacking chances,
Wow.
and their defense was, you can't say that it was passive. And yeah, it's important to not only recognize your opponent's resources, but also not to forget to pursue some of your own.
Yes, yes, yes. Great points. And what a fun exercise and lesson you gave me, and hopefully you at home too. That was awesome. Svetlana, thank you so much. Everybody else, I hope that you enjoyed it too. I cannot wait till next week for the next lesson. And yeah, that's all I have to say. I wish all of you a great rest of the week. Bye bye.
See you next week.